Everybody, welcome back to Maryland's Cafe Society right here at 1340 WJOL, WJOL.com, and Maryland'sCafeSociety.com. All right, and so before the break, we were talking about the three education bills that were aimed at preventing violence and encouraging reading and math that were signed into law here in the state of Illinois by Governor Pat Quinn. And we kind of drifted off a little bit and got into this the debate about whether kindergartners can actually read. And I, as we were talking, Nick and I, in my opinion, I think it's more or less word recognition and things of that nature, which brought to mind a big to-do. It was a big news story a few months ago, actually, on a product called Your Baby Can Read, sort of like the Hooked on Phonics thing.
Sure.
Yeah. And, there was this big debate about whether or not it was false advertising or a fraudulent product or whatever. And so, you had these educators versus the company, the creators of the product, going back and forth, debating whether or not the babies can actually read. And then, of course, depending on what show you were watching, you may have had a few parents who said, well, yeah, my baby recognizes words and things of that nature. Even with me being around preschoolers, places like Menards, Walgreens, Walmart, they recognize the word, So if we're driving down the street and they see the Walmart name logo, they go Walmart, If they see the Menards, they go Menards, so they kind of know McDonald's, obviously.
Yeah,
they
just
know
got
that.
the McDonald's down.
Yeah. So in my opinion, I think what they learn is word association and as I said, memorizing words.
So how do you what is reading then? Because if I read, I think I've memorized most of the words I see. I don't have to literally sound out every word. Yeah. So what is reading? Reading is when you're able to comprehend and understand what you're looking at, So a string of words together in a sentence. What are they saying? What does it mean? What's the idea? What's the idea? What's the main idea? What's the message? That's the concept of reading. So while kindergartners might know words, they can't read. Yeah, for the most part, which is really kind of confusing because, this is all about language development too. And I don't know if you've ever been around babies for any length of time, but, generally by the time a baby is maybe 6 months old or so, they can pretty much understand what you say to them. So, and then by the time they're a year old, for sure, they can follow instruction when you tell them sit down. Really? See, they know what sit down means. They sit down. Go get mommy's purse. They know what you said, So I really think it's a touchy fine line when we try to figure out where do you cross the line? Where do you officially say a child can read? It's a gradual learning of understanding. Yes. I don't think there's one day that all of a sudden, boom, you can read. Yeah, and then of course their comprehension levels are different too. It's complicated, but hats off to teachers though who take that on every day. I don't think you have to be so patient. You have to have the patience of a saint to be a teacher, especially for young kids. So absolutely, hats off to those people. Absolutely. All right. Well, speaking of new laws that have been signed, I think this goes back to, let's see, maybe a week or so ago in the state of Illinois, there was a reform legislation that was signed into law, actually for elections, dealing with schools again. I say this all the time. When are we going to get it? I mean, I don't know if you've ever studied the history of the educational system here in America and all of that, but you like history. There's a project for you. But it for as long as I can remember, there's always been a problem with the educational system. And so here we are again. So anyway, here's the education reform legislation that was passed
last week that will allow local school boards to put non-binding advisory referendums on a ballot. It also increases voting access for service members by letting ballots be emailed to military voters overseas, among other things. Also, election officials have to make ballots available for military personnel at least 46 days before the federal election. And, of course, this all coincided with the 4th of July. And it's these laws are going to take effect on January 1st. So not only, elections related to the school boards and education, but it also had to do with the military as well. So that's a great thing, to push that through for the reform that's needed. All right. Have you been keeping up with the status of the air traffic controllers at all?
I know. Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, they have a sleeping problem. Apparently, air traffic controllers do, which is not. It's one job where you should probably be awake for. There's a handful of jobs which require you to be conscious.
That's right.
And this is one of them.
Very, very important. Well, I stumbled upon this article from the Associated Press that talked about how the Federal Aviation Administration is creating a new air traffic control system. They're changing the technology, but they've hit the crossroads because now they're bumping heads with Congress, which, as we all know, they're in this big fight now over debt and, budget cuts and things of that nature, which totally explains why they've hit this sort of crossroads in their progress that they're making. But they're saying that because of this stalemate, the United States could lose its lead in the manufacture of high-tech aviation equipment to European competitors. Yeah. Of course, they could be saying this to kind of push it through, too, because we're number one in everything, or at least that's what we like to think. So they're saying it's getting harder to get money out of Congress to continue to bring the technology up to standard. But here's how much it's going to cost. Paying for this technology upgrade, which is handled by a company called NextGen, is estimated to cost at least $22 billion. And then another $20 billion for the airline industry through 2025.
I mean, I wish I had an idea of how much money that is to them. To us, you say $20 billion.
I know it.
And I can't even think about what that even looks like.
No.
But to them, what is that in relative to what? Is that like $300 to me?
Well,
is that a lot of money?
Here's what they're trying to do. Now, they said 75 years ago, really 75 years ago, almost to date, the federal government began tracking planes at the nation's first air traffic control center in Newark, New Jersey, Chicago, Illinois, and Cleveland, Ohio. Now, the original group of 15 controllers relied on radioed positioned reports from pilots. And it plotted the progress of flights using blackboards, maps, and boat-shaped weights.
Sure,
sounds real old school.
Yeah, that's got the chalk and blackboard out, and only getting their information from the actual pilot.
Oh my gosh! Yeah. Now then they said by the 1950s we advanced to a technology that involved radar. And that's still the basis of the technology that we're using right now today, with about 15,000 controllers to guide 50,000 flights a day. So the technology that we're using now is based on radar. But what this next generation air transportation system wants to do is ground the radar stations and replace them with satellite-based technology. So that's great. We have a caller. Let's go to Dave and see what's happening. Hi, Dave.